You've been told that buying secondhand is the sustainable alternative to fast fashion, and in many ways, that's true. But researchers have recently uncovered a psychological effect that's taking place that challenges what we know, and it's something that the fashion industry is enormously benefiting from. In this video, I'll explain what that research is, and I think you'll find it interesting if you're someone that enjoys shopping for clothes, or you're someone that just likes getting nerdy with numbers. Welcome to The Devil Wears Data. I've been a writer and a researcher for well over a decade. I've published in peer-reviewed journals, and I've also published on Wall Street as a reporter. If you're someone who likes interesting stories about the beauty and fashion industry, subscribe so we can see each other again. In order to explain to you this new research, I have to introduce you to someone named Macy. Macy's in college and she's trying to be environmentally conscious. One of the ways that she's doing that is she's buying a reusable tote bag so she doesn't have to keep using plastic bags. You know, it says something cute like "Save the Planet" on it. The next time she goes shopping, she brings the tote with her. And because she's being sustainable, she doesn't think too hard about what she's putting into the bag. Maybe she buys a plastic water bottle because it's a really hot day. Maybe a sweater she didn't plan on getting, maybe some t-shirts that have her favorite band logo on them. Over time, something really interesting happens. Macy isn't actually consuming less, she begins consuming more. She just feels better about it. This story illustrates something called moral licensing. Moral licensing is when doing something good gives people a subconscious license or permission to behave a little bit selfishly or badly later. It's not conscious, but it is in a way that changes your behavior. Well, there's an example of this in fashion, and that's what this new research highlights. People who buy secondhand clothes are actually inclined to buying a higher volume of stuff than people who do not. Because the justification is, I'm buying secondhand, so it's fine. And what's happening, the indirect effect, is that the people who are buying secondhand are actually generating a lot of waste.
I think the really striking thing that we found out is that consumers who's heavily involved with secondhand consumerism, not only that they buy more clothes in general than other consumers buying in the primary market, but they're buying more clothes both within the secondary market, but also in the primary market, and they tend to dispose the clothes faster. So they're actually generating more textile waste than regular consumers.
Researchers surveyed 18 to 79-year-olds, and they found that buying secondhand can actually lead to consuming way too much. It's essentially a behavioral pattern. And this was true across gender, age, income level. For example, here's some data that shows that people who make more money spent more on both new and used clothing. This group also was more likely to discard items in good condition, indicating greater overall consumption, even though they were the most likely to have knowledge about sustainability. That's really surprising. Apparently, educating people about sustainable practices doesn't actually lead to doing more sustainable practices. Researchers hypothesized that the more people knew about sustainability, the better they would do, but this research shows that's actually not what's happening.
I really think that most consumers believe that when they buy secondhand clothing, it's inherently sustainable.
The study says, contrary to expectations, greater knowledge about the environmental impacts of fashion was negatively correlated with sustainable purchasing and disposable behaviors. For example, sustainability knowledge showed a small but statistically significant negative correlation with sustainable actions.
Don't try to replace the products that you're buying in buying a lot of other sustainable product. It's not about the product, it's about the volume of purchasing and the quantity.
So it's not important just what you purchase, but how much of it you purchase too. This kind of research really points to two big consequences, one for the individual and one for the corporation. The implications for the individual is that education is not enough. Educating someone isn't actually going to help change their behavioral patterns because they're so ingrained in the way that we live. Someone might know not to buy too many clothes, but if they're in a shop and they see a really cute red cardigan that they think is going to look really great on them at a party they're going to on Saturday, they're not going to be thinking about all of that knowledge that they have. They're going to be thinking about how badly they need that sweater. So if it's a behavioral pattern, it might be therapy that's needed to actually help people. Researchers in Germany recently looked at that, whether those impulsive buying decisions can be mitigated through brain training exercises, because it turns out that information isn't enough when it comes to limiting consumption. The researchers tried a simple computer task that strengthens self-control. People see images on a screen, and when a go signal appears, they have to quickly press a key. When a no-go signal appears, they must not press anything. Over time, the brain learns to automatically stop when certain images appear. In this experiment, shopping images were paired with no-go signals, and participants repeatedly practiced stopping themselves when seeing shopping-related cues. This data shows that brain retraining may be effective for some people who struggle with impulsive buying, whether it's secondhand shopping or fast fashion shopping. Let's talk about what this means for corporations, because essentially this is a business channel where I love to talk about money. The secondhand market is expected to grow 2 to 3 times faster than the first-hand market from 2025 to 2027. Online resale marketplaces make up the lion's share of sales, accounting for 88% of resale spending in the US in 2024. US online resale is forecast to grow 16% annually, reaching $34 billion by 2027. That all makes sense. The less you feel guilty about buying clothes, the more you're inclined to buy clothes. And more purchases means more transactions. And more transactions means more profits. In fact, in one survey, researchers found that secondhand purchases are leading to first-hand discoveries. So people are discovering new items through brands that they buy secondhand. Now, it might feel a little bit sad to hear all this, that the solution that we have been sold to for so long has some negative consequences. There is some good news that might come out of all this. Demand for sustainable shopping solutions might finally give rise to companies that have failed at taking off. Investors have previously turned away from investing in things like clean tech or sustainability or climate change initiatives because investors like getting a return on their investment as soon as they can. And normally with companies that are focused on sustainability, the returns can take decades to show up. A few years ago, there was a company called resale that personally made me very excited to read about. They were turning old clothes into new clothes at an industrial scale. Instead of throwing out worn-out cotton clothes in the trash, the goal was to break them down and turn them into raw materials that fashion brands could use to make new fabric. They made a white powder of pulp called circulose, and fabric makers could mix this circulose with other materials and spin it into new fibers, which brands could then turn into clothes. Brands like H&M and Levi's publicly supported this idea, but then things went wrong. In simple terms, the technology worked out, but the business didn't scale fast enough. They spent a lot of money building a large factory in Sweden, but it was expensive to run. Fashion brands were slow to commit to buying large volumes of clothes, and the economics just didn't line up. In 2024, the company went bankrupt, even though the idea is still considered promising.
With resale, it's like big investment is necessary to create entirely new material development things at scale, at the demand of cost parity with current virgin materials that everyone demands. And that takes massive investment, it takes massive infrastructure, and it takes time. And so without the runway of time and investment, things like resale struggle and, never make it to their objectives of scale and producing, in their case, man-made cellulosic fibers from textile waste.
And this can happen to companies if you launch a product that the market isn't quite ready for or the industry isn't quite ready for. So what is the moral of this video? The first is that secondhand shopping doesn't solve society's problem with consuming way too much. It actually hides it extremely well. The second is that the fashion industry doesn't just profit from fast fashion, it profits from people's guilt about fast fashion. This can be good news. It can push investors to invest in innovative companies that they haven't before if they see enough of a demand from the public for sustainable shopping options. But it could also have negative consequences to the individual who may not see that moral licensing framing. And it could lead to destructive industries that frame themselves as doing good, but really they're having the same impact as fast fashion always has. I won't get into how this is impacting people globally because that could be an entirely different video of its own. And I won't talk about people who have to thrift out of necessity and not because it's a trendy, cool thing to do. But I want to know, did this video change anything for you? Did you watch it and think, you know what, I might be one of those people in this video who shop secondhand but buy way too much? Will you shop less now that you know this? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you next time.